Welcome to this session. It's today's media and entertainment and your data skills. We have a great panelist waiting to answer your questions and to present and share their information on the industry and how they use the data and the future of data skills and the roles. So I'm going to introduce Xavier. He's the moderator, and he will introduce the panelists. Xavier?
Thank you so much. First of all, I know it's a tight hall, so if you guys want to just keep 6 feet away from one another, that would be good. No. That's for those watching at home. It's not packed. That's why.
Xavier, one thing. I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't address the question and answer. So if you have questions as they go through and present their questions and share their stories, please come up front to the mics and ask the questions. They welcome them. Thank you.
Okay, no more jokes for me. So, hi everybody. My name is Xavier Kochhar. Welcome to this panel. This panel is really about how what data is doing to the media and entertainment industry, the media and entertainment companies, how the landscape has changed, how it is changing. We have, great group of people on the panel, and I will just briefly start off by introducing myself, and then I'll ask Eric and then Keith and Tracey to introduce themselves as well. My name is Xavier Kochhar. I have been in the media and entertainment industry for more than 25 years. Done a little bit of everything. I've been a talent agent. I've been worked in studios, helped to launch a handful of direct-to-consumer video platforms. Most recently, I am the Chief Operating and Financial Officer at a children's entertainment company. And probably the most important thing for me is that I am on the board, along with my friend Subhash, for Data for Good, which is a nonprofit where we try to utilize data solutions to help address issues such as homelessness, climate change, etc. So that's me. I'll hand it over to Eric. Eric.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been in the entertainment industry for more than 20 years. I worked with Xavier at Warner Brothers and Keith as well. Currently, I am at IMDb Amazon, leading consumer business development and partnerships for that group as part of the entertainment portfolio that Amazon has. And that means that I'm looking to partner with both internal Amazon companies as well as third-party companies where we're looking to use data and insights to grow our advertising revenue and create value for those consumers who rely on IMDb on a daily basis.
Hello, I'm Keith Camoosa. It's a great pleasure to be back at DataCon. It's been a couple years, I think, since we were in person here, so it's great to be back, and always great to be back on the USC campus. So I've about 10 years plus in entertainment. Notably, I was part of a group of people that were leading a data organization at Warner Brothers, where we were introducing new types of data decision-making to the studio. Also helped to launch HBO Max with Xavier over here. And when I was at Warner, I worked closely with Subhash as well. Currently, I'm at an advertising holding company where I'm helping to bring big data techniques and data science into the company so that we can modernize our capabilities for our clients.
Hi, I'm Tracey Trench, longtime producer and studio executive in entertainment. I was movie producer, produced Cheaper by the Dozen and Pink Panther and some other movies, lots of comedies, and didn't use much data then at all. And I'm the sort of more of the creative content person on this panel, I guess, because I've watched Hollywood kind of go from not using a lot of data to now you're the most hired people in the companies, and they really need you. And my transition was I went to China and built the DreamWorks animation studio in Shanghai, came back and then just continued building entertainment verticals and delivery systems for Discovery. I just built a content product for Amazon, content delivery product, and then Right now, I'm actually working with Xavier at a children's entertainment company on games. So my background's in all different kinds of content, including games, and I help the big media companies build out content businesses. But now I'm deeply immersed in data.
Thank you. And please do not let the mild-manneredness of this panel fool you. These are all entertainment media ballers. I mean, there's this, I mean, I was just listening to everything that they said, and you guys are ridiculously humble. So, I mean, like what Tracey just said, as she's been in the business for such a long time. Eric has been, you know, in the CFO and operations for a studio, like, and has seen things change over the last 15, 20 years, and now is doing it again for a big platform in Amazon. And by the way, that like advertising company that Keith is working for, he's the chief data and product officer for one of the biggest advertising holding companies, which basically drives the money to make the entertainment industry work. So, yeah, so these guys, they know their stuff. So, okay, so what we thought we would do for the next like 55 minutes or so, this isn't kind of going to be like I'm asking questions and they're answering them. We're just going to kind of have a dialogue, and anyone, like, we're all moderators. It's just if honestly, if it wasn't like this, we would just be in a circle talking to each other. So you are a part of the circle now. So if you have any questions on any topics, or if you have any thoughts, like, I mean, honestly, sometimes I think the only difference between like people like us and like we could easily be sitting there right now and we could be asking you all the questions. In fact, we will, because we need the help. But anyway, with that, I sort of wanted to, just to get the ball rolling, I wanted to, I guess, maybe anyone, but maybe Eric, you could start, is like what, so we have there's sort of like the tech companies, the Silicon Valley companies over the last 20 years, and there's sort of an ethos and a culture to them that is largely driven by, data analysis, gathering data, structuring it, and then making decisions, in some cases very quick decisions. In fact, there's this Silicon Valley adage, right, that like, it's okay if you fail, just fail fast. Hollywood is, I wouldn't say Hollywood has been the best at failing fast. Hollywood's good at failing, but just often not fast. So what do you think? I mean, has Silicon Valley changed Hollywood forever, or has Hollywood changed Silicon Valley? And what are talk about that? Is there anything to talk about there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked a lot, and really it's great to have everyone brought into this conversation because we were having a good time in sort of the prep for this, discussing this. And, you know, for years, people have talked about this convergence of tech and Hollywood and media and entertainment, and what does that really mean? And outside of just acquisitions and buying up companies, from a cultural standpoint, they come from two very different places. You know, in the entertainment industry, you have quite a few sort of, I would say, general athletes. People are able to do a lot of different things. In the tech world, you have people who are really, really good at being single-threaded owners of a specific task or a specific area. And so you now have the mashup of these two very different ways of approaching business around essentially art, which is subjective. And so you wind up with an interesting mix. And I guess, you know, the purpose of this panel is to discuss how data enters that conversation. And, you know, data has always been a part of the entertainment industry, but the data was primarily in legacy days driven by financial data. So it was returns, box office returns, profit participation, operational efficiency, margin, those sorts of things. Now, as we head into a direct-to-consumer and more of an advertising-driven business by some of the large players, the question becomes, what are the key metrics associated with those kinds of relationships you have, and how do you then create both a business that is successful and engaging for that audience? And the clash of those two cultures is taking place in real time, and we can see how some companies are doing a better job of handling that than others. And I'd be curious, others on the panel, in your experience, you know, how have you seen that come to life? and where have there been wins or losses in that world?
I think there are so many examples. One thing that comes to mind is typically, right, it was the financial data that was the driver of analytics. And I think in a lot of studios going back a decade or so plus, it was sort of, you were a bit of a heretic if you thought you could predict the box office or you could predict how many people would watch a piece of content. But I think over time, the studios became aware that you could get it mostly right, and sometimes you get it wrong. And I think what they found was these things were helpful. It was more helpful to have analytics in place than not have them. And then, more recently, I think we're moving from a place of to the data engineers in the audience and the data scientists, more of a systemization of those analytics and less of a point in time where, let's say, the finance department would gather data and do an analysis. Now there's a collaboration with the big data group where you could have something that's running continuously and you have more access to real-time analytics.
I think there's a huge difference between linear content and streaming direct to consumer and games and going direct to consumer. So with games, as Xavier was saying, we were all talking on Thursday, it's basically a huge amount of data wrapped up in a fun experience, right? So you're able to track a user so easily, and everything that they do, you can iterate on the mechanics of the game. You can figure out exactly where they churn out of the game. It's much easier to kind of amass and tell a story with that data that's easy to give to creatives and have them actually act upon it. With linear content, you make the content and it's basically done, right? So if you're trying to predict in advance, there's still a huge clash between creative people in a linear medium and data people who say, this is the way you should do it. Because we just realized that our two, young adult shows that we're streaming on Netflix are incredibly successful. So can you take that script and actually make it for 14-year-olds? And most creative people will say, no, I'm not going to do that. But and it's what we were talking about a bit is that it can be there's a danger in trying to predict audience taste. Like it's anathema to say, oh, that's going to be a hit movie. We're all somewhat in the hit driven business. So it's so important to have the data that a creative person can feel is reliable, right? Because if we feel in the linear space, oh yeah, we can really rely on that, then we're going to be much more friendly to the data story. With games, I find we look at everything that streamers look at. We look at ARPU, and we look at retention, and we have recommendation engines within when we're offering a suite of games that we're using data to generate those things. So did you have a question? Sure.
Please, yeah, come to the mic.
Oh, that's a really good question. So
Actually, thank you. I was going to ask, actually, open that up to the panel as well. So Tracey, you can start, but oh, by the way, when you ask questions, it'd be helpful, like if in addition to your name, just like who are, like, are you at a data company or, yeah, it'd be helpful if you could share that. Awesome. Okay, cool. So for the entire panel, but Tracey, you can start. So when we talk about linear content versus, let's say, VOD content, I know I'm the VOD, but we'll describe it in a second. What is the difference, and also what implications do those differences have on decision making, linear and on demand? So go ahead.
I think VOD content is linear content, actually, because I look at it as content that has a beginning, middle, and end. You don't interact with it. You don't change the cadence of it. But there is a difference between between scheduled content as opposed to on-demand content. So streaming, now these free, these ad-supported free TV channels are coming and kind of swooping in underneath networks, and that's, those are linear, but the content within them is also linear. That's usually the way that I describe it. It's non-interactive. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have a slightly different definition of it. I mean, the traditional broadcast networks, as you said, are scheduled and linear, and there is a different way of measuring success around that content, whether it be Nielsen or, if Nielsen got fired, whoever else comes in, and the ability to attribute, users to that content has been challenging for many years. As the world has shifted to more digital platforms and the ability to track those users with pixels across, well, depending upon Apple and all the others, across multiple sites, you're able to then figure out what that user's journey is with content. The way in which that content is presented to you, though, does change. There is linear type digital content with services like Pluto TV and others where you don't get to choose when you view a program. It is on from a period of time. And then there are the VODs, the video on demand services, where you are either able to choose with ads or you subscribe to them. So free VOD or SVOD or transactional buy it.
Yeah, I'll add a bit from a data perspective. So I think linear inventory was typically measured with like a third party, like a Nielsen. Success was usually based post hoc on eyeballs. I'll just add from a streaming perspective, a whole new set of ways of evaluating content, looking at second by second drop off, building in the narrative kind of like story post to the second by second viewership to understand what's holding attention, where people are falling off. So that's been, I think, probably helpful to the creative side, but probably also needs to be done in a certain way.
Yeah, it's all in the way it's presented, I think.
Yeah. I think there was, the primacy of primary research, doing a focus group, right? If we have a focus group, we get back the results. We have a pretty good signal on how this piece of content's going to do. And I think that's still true, but there's a lot more data that now goes along with it.
I mean, for what it's worth, the way I understand it is, I think, so I'm a little slower than these guys, so I think about it a little different. So, I mean, the same but different. See, that's a slow thing for me to say even. But so linear, for like forever, up until very recently, we didn't call it anything else but linear, but it was just TV.
It's just TV, yeah.
Right, and essentially, what Tracey was talking about earlier, like linear and on demand, she's talking about that's similar. She's right as it relates to storytelling. Right, so there's is there a linear story that follows like point A, point B, point C, whatever, and versus interactive, where the user, the consumer, the gamer can actually affect the story in the play, right? That's storytelling, but the way that's separate. I think that's on the creative side. But by the way, Tracey is a top creative, so of course she's going to think that way, right? So linear used to be TV. That means somebody else, was what Keith and Eric just said, somebody else, usually in some corner office in Burbank, is programming that and saying, like, when you watch like network television, that's linear because it's like a river. And when you turn it on, that's what you watch. Then there's on demand. Netflix is on demand. HBO Max is on demand. Okay, on demand is I'm watching that show. No one's programming that for me. There's a tray, there's a carousel. They present something almost like I'm going to a grocery store and I'm choosing that item, as opposed to somebody making dinner for me or something like that, right?
And that's another data-driven situation, right? Because there's a recommendation engine that serves you up individually what's in your tray based on what you've watched before, or what they know about you when you log in, or maybe from other data that they've bought and gathered. So, we were talking earlier about how Netflix, I'll watch one documentary about one specific thing, and then all I get is more and more and more of the same. And I think, in a way, part of that is because they have a very surface, probably, expanse of data that, they're collecting. They're not going any deeper. They're not going into, what my interests are outside of Netflix. And one of the companies that I'm advising, and there's a gentleman here in the audience, I know I was talking to him about it outside, is called Binge, B-I-N-J, and they've actually come up with an engine now that will, they basically mine social media data and emojis and emotions, and they figure out how to present that data to the content providers to say, hey, here's where you should go. And at the same time, they have a consumer facing interface that says, come here and talk about what you love. And so they're gathering their own data, but they've just in the last 3 months gotten up to 10 billion, they've been able to grab 10 billion interactions to find out what people are talking about online. So
I'd be curious to know, so we talked a little bit earlier about first-party data and the reason that, we're increasingly dissatisfied with the recommendations that come from many of these services. How do you think about different sources of data to inform those kinds of choices, both from an advertising side as well as from, say, a programming side?
Yeah, so, and that's a great question. And just to tie a nice little bow on the linear thing, right? What Keith was saying earlier about the implications between linear and on demand, it's 1,000,000% data, right? Because when something is on demand, the platform has a great set of data about consumption behavior, about usage behavior, about how those pieces of content correlate to one another, right? Because historically, content was like channels or like networks or or cable networks or what have you. They were put onto cable operators, Comcast, Cox, etc. That was the first party data, right? And by the way, when it was through coaxial cable, you didn't even get two-way data, right? But now over the top, over the internet, you get data. Like, so that's what Keith was talking about. Like, I know when somebody turns on a service, the platform knows that it's actually a KPI, it's a metric, first time stream. When someone first comes on a service, what is the first piece of content that they watch? By the way, you could imagine that's pretty valuable, right? Because that's what's drawing them to that service, right? If I turn on Apple TV Plus, and I put on Ted Lasso, then Apple TV Plus, Apple knows, oh, he's coming here for Ted Lasso, right? So before, we never had access to that. And in the linear world, to Keith's point, the only way you kind of even knew any of that stuff was through third parties that would be like, send surveys and say, hey, did you watch that show? Did you not? And as you know, surveys, like you guys, if you're in the data field, what people say is not always what they do, right? And so with respect to and Keith, you can jump in here, but with respect to first-party data, one of the biggest changes in the last 10, 15 years is we actually have first-party data.
So I'll just add to what you're saying. So this has opened up a whole new surface area for different types of analytics. So with a DTC, like a DTC streaming service, they now, based on content viewed, frequency of viewing, what was watched, what wasn't, time intervals of when they're watching, when they're not, you can predict things like churn, you can look at lifetime value. And so you have direct user metrics that are highly informed by what people are watching. So that's an entire new set of information available to the business. But I think, Eric, as you alluded to, I think what we're all realizing now is that that's not enough to only have your own first-party data. It's that complement of first-party plus other data sets that allow you to know what's happening outside of your own business.
Yeah, no, exactly. And Binge is a great example of that. There are, IMDb is very good at serving information around specific actors and titles that people are looking for, and that's what they've come to use our service for as a utility. But in terms of deciding what to watch, we've gotten much more sophisticated as how we serve up those results as an independent, I'll say that in quotes, independent third-party service, and using the kind of thing you're talking about with Binge, being able to listen to social media data and other noisy surfaces and filter that through and get some insights and watch how that changes over time. Because it's really important that moment to moment, as cultural, and it's geographically specific, as cultures change, as attitudes change, as the water cooler talk changes, can you, and as Keith said, in real time, in that stream, pick out insights that can then help you serve up value to those users.
Yeah, I would just add that the social listening is essentially a proxy for word of mouth, and it's always been true that the signal, word of mouth is like the strongest data that one could have. Like you tell your friends, watch this show, I'm watching it, I think you'll like it. And that kind of signal is obviously not necessarily first party. You can tie that in, it's, you have a lot more analytical possibilities to make sense of what's happening and why. This social can explain the whys and give you some context that you can't necessarily easily extract from your own viewing data.
The larger platforms, to the panel's point here, first party data is pretty freaking awesome, right? Like, I mean, think about why, in a sense, why Walmart became Walmart in the last 20 years, right? Because they had, by the way, not just data, but data, as all you know, data at scale, right? So you can, if you have a small data set and you guys have heard me say this, but if data at scale really, really matters, okay? And to use sort of a thought experiment as to why, imagine, if you will, that you guys have never, ever, ever seen a quarter before, okay? And I present a quarter to you. I hold a quarter, the coin. I hold a quarter, and one side is heads, and one side is tails. And I say, I'm gonna flip this. And when it comes down, what's the likelihood it'll come down on heads? And I say, I'll tell you what, since you've never seen this before, you don't know how this coin may behave, I'll give you a small little sampler, right? And let's say I flip the coin 10 times. And after 10 times, if it comes up tails 8 times, as data folks, I ask you, what are the likelihood it's going to come up heads? What's the answer? 20%, right? If it comes up 8 times. But if I flip that coin 10,000 times, won't it start looking closer to 50-50? And that's why it's so important. That's why, by the way, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Walmart, whether it's Netflix, there is a kind of like a breakthrough velocity with data at scale where the rich get richer, and you should get more accurate. We have a question here.
Testing. Cool. Really great stuff so far. My name is Christian. I'm actually a manager of analytics at Activision and Blizzard, but also I'm ex-Warner Brothers, so it's cool to see my brothers up here and sisters. So my question is, what kind of metrics are you looking at to track VOD? What's performing best? I feel like being at DataCon, I would love to hear how entertainment is using analytics to then make business decisions. So in that case, what KPIs are you looking at to determine if HBO is better than Netflix? And then how do you use that to make a business decision?
That's a good question. All right, who wants to
share the special sauce?
We'll leave that to one of you two.
So the question is, how is data used to affect business decisions?
Okay, maybe we'll just start with the first one, which is what metrics are you looking at for Netflix, HBO, and how do you compare them against each other? One thing you said was churn, LTV, but I'm sure if you're at Netflix, you won't know the LTV of HBO Max. So how do you use data to, I guess, what metrics are you tracking? We'll just
wait, when you say, just to clarify, yeah. Are you saying how Netflix might use their data in comparison to other platforms, and to know what is that? Yeah.
That's fair. I guess I'm taking it from a data analytics perspective, looking outwards, looking in, like, how would I know which companies are performing the best? What metrics would I use? Like, I know, like, the obvious one is how many users does Netflix have versus HBO, but like, what are some other metrics that you guys might look at?
So yeah, and I'm gonna ask you to I'm gonna double click on your objective, right? When you say performing best, for whom, right? So like, even like, is it for, like, when you're comparing HBO Max and Netflix, is it just for like a journalism purpose? Is it just for, is it for like, if you're an advertiser, where should I place dollars? Is it, or is it, oh, by the way, like, I'm a corp dev finance guy, right? Trust me, the finance people at these companies, they look at it completely different than maybe the data people, right? So from your perspective, and I will tell you, almost, I mean, yeah, from being at a couple of these, I've been at Hulu, I've been at DirecTV, AT&T, and HBO Max, and I can tell you that even though there's some industry standards, KPIs, which we can talk about, LTV, first time stream, cost per minute, and all that, there's a bunch of KPIs, but I would say rarely did we ever go, like, we benchmark off of the other guys. Mostly we benchmark off of what the CFO and the CEO wanted us to do. So, so back to you, what's the objective that you're...
First of all, I'm going to say I love that, because as a data analyst, you always got to ask these kind of questions. You're collecting the business requirements. So I'm going to say, from the outside looking in, like, if I had to invest in a company, let's say I'm an investor and I want to choose the best streaming that's going to survive the longest, like, which metrics should I look at?
So finance is investment question.
So really, if you go up to that level, it's a couple of things. Right now, if you were comparing all the streamers, you'd say ARPU is really one of the biggest ones.
Can you define ARPU?
That is revenue per subscriber, average revenue per subscriber. And so you would look at that for each one, because what you have is, you saw, I guess it was yesterday or the day before, so Disney did their earnings report, right? They eclipsed Netflix for the first time, but their rates are so much lower. They also had to announce a rate hike because they lost $1 billion last quarter in their streaming service. So they're now saying, this is our path to profitability. We have to raise our rates. Netflix is the only profitable streamer when it comes to looking at things like ARPU and the bigger picture. But the other piece that I know investors are looking at is, who's got the goods? So, you know, Netflix would love to have the prestige of HBO Max. They don't have it. They're spending like crazy to try to get it, but they don't have it. Disney hasn't even hit their content cadence yet. They won't even hit it probably until the end of this year. So they're just, you know, they have so many things. So does HBO Max. I mean, now they're going to load in Discovery content, but that's not even the most important. They have a huge library of, you know, and I work in the kids business a lot too. They've got kids stuff from, you know, from Cartoon Network and all these other places. They just have a ton of stuff that they haven't put out yet. So in a way, if you're an investor, you're like, okay, I can see these paths to profitability by looking at the rate that people are charging and how much the revenue is per subscriber. But at the same time, it's a race, right? And all these other companies are losing money hand over fist. But I kind of think, this is just my own prediction, I think it's shifting back over to the real content makers. This is not an investment advice of any sort. But yeah, so that's what I would say. Anyway, long answer, but sorry.
I'd say there's, in addition, that there's other metrics that you may want to look at. So time spent. How much time are people spending with each of these platforms? So, you know, there's the battle for attention, and you know, these are things that we look at from the advertising side. How many people? How long are they watching certain things? This is why TikTok is, you know, just an incredible company, an incredible thing that's taken over culture. I mean, people are spending hours on average, so that has to come from somewhere else, unless they're multitasking everything at the same time. So I would also look at those metrics. I would also suggest, kind of getting back to some of the mentions of the recommendation engine, I would also suggest that there's some softer metrics, maybe through social listening and places like Reddit, where you can get a feel for the user experience. You know, and I think with certain streamers, it's becoming more common to hear, like, from your own network or your own friends, like, yeah, their recommendations never make sense to me. Like, I don't ever really click on them. The question is, like, why is that? Can they improve it? I think those things can also be telling too about the sort of velocity of a business. And so you want to look at these things over time in a time series, like not only who's got what, but how is it changing, like who's on the rise, and take those things into consideration for your investments.
I would suggest one thing. I would suggest going to any of these companies, if they're publicly traded, annual report and reading the management discussion and analysis. And within that, you'll see the key metrics that they care about, and you'll be able to back solve in some way for the ways in which they view their business. You may not be able to pick it apart in fine detail, but you'll at least know sort of directionally where their head is in terms of what kinds of things. And if you look at a number of different companies, you can see how they may or may not line up with one another, or do they? And you'll be able to make some comparisons in that way.
So before we move on to the next question.
I feel like that's good. I know we got a line.
Yeah,
going
no,
too.
but before we move on to the next question, I want to offer something, which is everything that these guys said is what I would say. I'm just stoking the fire here, guys, being a little provocative. I don't think it's right. Let me explain. For your objective, okay? Not that these aren't important metrics. They are ridiculously important metrics. But because you said investment, okay? There's two types of public companies and private companies, okay? When you are making an investment, yeah, by the way, to be clear, no investment advice. They're like, this is like, do not, anything we say on this panel, this is, we are not investment professionals. Please talk to your own investment professionals. But public companies and private companies, when any investor puts money in a company, what they are doing is that it's almost like a time value of money. They're saying, what do I believe over a certain investment time horizon? What do I think the company will be worth over 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, et cetera? The KPIs, the metrics that matter to the finance and investment community are not amount of content. They're not first time streams. Those are all proxy. By the way, up until, or I should say until very recently, a metric that did matter to to the investment community was subscribers. Not anymore. Or I should say it still kind of matters, but not anymore. What the ultimately, and by the way, for whatever this is worth, I've been in the corp dev and finance groups at a couple of big companies. Depending on the company, the most important metrics are what's on the P&L and balance sheet. Revenue. The revenue is for when there isn't really profit, okay? So for private companies, EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. For public companies, depending on the size of public company, it's OI, or operating income. And then finally, it's net income, okay? And the reason it's the reason why these are all sort of ultimately some sort of profit or cash metrics, because what's happening is that investors are saying, if I put money in today, I believe that this company will produce this amount of profit down the line. If you stop and you think about it, go, well, how do we explain Netflix's growth over 15 years? Because up until very recently, they were not profitable. But why did that stock price keep going up? The reason is back to what they were saying, is because when you are not getting high returns from your dollars, like as investors, and think about interest rates were pretty much zero for however long, right? And so then you place your money in higher risk places and higher growth places. And subscribers were used as a proxy for profit, right? And so now that everything that's happened on Wall Street and inflation and the macroeconomic conditions, now a lot of the investment community is saying, okay, we were just giving you guys money to grow. Now it's time to make money. Now it's time for you guys to monetize. And by the way, what has happened? What has happened in the last few months? Netflix announces an ad service. Disney announces an ad service, right? The days of, by the way, this isn't just in this space, like the Silicon Valley companies. By the way, do you guys know there's something called the millennial subsidy. Does anyone know what that is? The millennial subsidy, it's an investment or kind of term, is that and I think it's because the millennials sort of grew up in this time period where a lot of the services that were provided at a ridiculous discount, right? So think about Uber as an example, or Instacart, or any of these platforms, or Airbnb. By the way, you guys know Airbnb, you could like rent a 3,000 square foot house for like $200 a night. By the way, somebody's not making money there, right? Or I could take an Uber 30 miles and it would cost me $12, right? Why? Because investors were allowing these companies to get big and grow without profit. And what are you now seeing? Those investors like, time to make money. And what have you seen all across the board? The prices have gone up, and like now people are trying to figure out how to make money. And in our space, video content, you are now starting to see monetization in a big way. Part of the reason why Keith is on the panel is entertainment and media. What is the number one way that they monetize always? Like it always works out this way. Advertising, right? And so the advertisers are now becoming important. Disney Plus, ad service. Netflix, ad service. Next question, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Professor Arif Ansari here. I just wanted to give you a heads up. I have another talk which I'm going to give today right after this. So if you see me leaving, don't take it in a bad way. So my talk is on perfect viral ad prediction. Because he was talking about KPIs, I want to give my insights because I work with Wavemaker and Netflix India. And what they're looking at is out of the box KPIs. So we help them to do SWOT analysis on the fly. So they want to compare themselves against Amazon Prime. I think one of your Amazon guys here. And also they want to compare against Disney from the social media space. What are they looking at? Because they're looking at the long term. They want to understand what is the subscriber acquisition cost in the social media space, because they do the work for you. And they want to understand because they want to convert the prospects and existing customers who are going to watch in YouTube the ads, the teaser trailers of the upcoming shows, and they want to see how they want to go. The second thing they want to know is, hey, what is the virality of the ads, which we help to predict, as well as resonance. The third thing, interesting metrics we created, is called the push score. Your ability to push somebody to the top of the marketing funnel, which is basically a function of how many ads you put per day, is called constant touch, along with what? How many, what is the resonance? Then we also do the top of the funnel estimate. How many people from the social media space you're pushing them to the top of the funnel? So all these things are new way of looking at KPIs out of the box. This is not current, but future, which Netflix looks at it and sees how does it translate into my future growth and all those things. I just want to share this point. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's kind of what Xavier was trying to get at with the question and trying to push on the investor piece. What really matters is what question you're trying to answer in order to develop the right perspective and hypothesis to test it and to understand what it is. So if it's from the marketing standpoint, which is not the other side of the coin for what you're doing, right? Awareness funnel all the way down to conversion. Is performance marketing the right way for you to go as a service? So let's take Netflix, for example, where they spend their money. They completely pulled out a year or two ago of some places, and they're spending a lot of their money in social media because they're seeing better results on TikTok, for example, and on Instagram and other places like that. It will change again over time as these services find new and unique ways to engage with those customers, and as TikTok, for example, changes the way in which they monetize that 1 billion+ users a month. So it really depends on the question. You have to be very careful in constructing that question to be able to understand what it is and challenge, this is a data conversation, challenge your biases. You talk about out of the box thinking. It's really important to pressure test every one of those KPIs and just make sure you're not bringing a bunch of bias into the conversation.
Great point. We'll go on this side. To Eric's point, there is one of my favorite lines in movies, in cinema. I'll tell you the line. You guys tell me what the movie is. The line is, "Your scientists were so preoccupied on whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should." Everyone knows that Jurassic Park. So I was the founder of a structured data and analytics company, video personalization engine, and we developed I would argue to this day, one of the best recommendation engines like in the world, and for premium video. And when I pitched it to all the studios and all the platforms, and it was, and Keith knows about it, these guys all know about it. It was, I mean, like the data science and how we figured out a way to programmatically structure like billions of data sets and show this technology to the studio heads and the platforms. And you know what the reaction was? Cool. So, and I was like, what do you mean so? I was like, this is now you can take this. And what they said was, what does this do? I was like, well, because people will get the content that they want. And they said, and what does that do? And so that, to your point, it's very important to not just clean up and analyze data. What are we actually trying to accomplish? Question.
Thank you, panel. My name is Vivek Ta. I'm with Spectrum Data Services, a small consulting company. We do placements for the media field. So my question is more as a consumer rather than as a data professional. And I think you kind of jumped on it right now when you said, so what? But I like to watch Amazon Prime, I like to watch Netflix, and I noticed that on Amazon, I really like to see the star ratings. And I like to see the little bit of write-up. Then I go to Netflix, and there's no star ratings, there's no write-ups. They just kind of jump into the movie and they kind of start showing something to you. Now, maybe it's a matter of, I'm not a millennial, I'm more of a Generation Xer, but I'm just naturally attracted to Amazon. So my question is, why do companies not ask you a very quick question at the end of the show saying, rate this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars, or maybe 1 or 2 very quick, very simple questions saying, did you like this? What are your favorites? It just seems that you're running around the bush going to Facebook, you're going to TikTok, what do people like, what's on here, but why not ask directly and see that the people who are watching the show, what they say? It just seems to be something missing to me, and that's what I want to know from you guys as executives.
Well, I think it's great that you love 2 of the key features that IMDb has, which is the star rating, yes, which is also available for purchase if anyone would like to license that for their platform. And X-ray, which you're talking about, which is all the metadata we have associated with all the content that is at the moment only available within the Amazon ecosystem.
I'd like to point out how smooth the panelists have been in plugging their own companies and their clients and their services. That's like, this is next level stuff here.
No, I agree with him.
Oh, you learned from me? Okay.
I agree with what he's saying. I'd like to see that. I go to IMDb to see that.
So we're always looking for, new ways to engage audiences in ways that matter to them. Amazon is famous for working backwards from the customer and constantly doing surveys with our research team to figure out from the content side, the consumer content side, I don't mean content like produced shows, but what is it that consumers would like at scale to be able to serve up things that are interesting to them? And then X-ray, as an example, is available to everyone, but you don't have to have it on. So there's a choice associated with it. But Amazon does do that and leverages their capabilities to serve up that useful information.
I'll just add, from a data science perspective in the abstract, it's sort of baffling to me why, to what you're saying, that there aren't more ways for users to input the things that they want to watch, in a sort of non-obtrusive way. I suspect that there's tension between usability and collecting too much from each user. But I have the same questions as you.
I'll add into that real quick. So we have a product we're testing on Fire TV. It's a What to Watch app that you can, if you have a Fire Stick or a Fire TV app, you can check out, that gamifies this recommendation around what kind of content, asking for user input so that we can, it's very, very much a beta product. But the idea is that, we have, again, first-party data that's great. We have third-party data that we pair with it, and now we're trying to figure out what that right balance is with user input, whether it be a single, would you like to see a horror film is the traditional kind of question, but would you like to see a horror film that has, very gory or comedy or romance? And this starts to give you a more nuanced kind of view around what it is. So I think, I'd love to hear from others too about, what is the right amount of user interaction that doesn't create friction but adds value?
So, what a shock. I'm going to disagree with you. Okay. So it's not just these guys. And then who's next? I'm going to disagree. There's a reason. There's a reason. Remember I said data at scale is very powerful, right? I said that earlier. Here's the rub with this thing at the end of something, and you say, did you like it or did you not? Right? If you guys aren't on any of these platforms, Facebook and this and that, sometimes they put up did you see an ad for blah, 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 or whatever? What do you think of this? Okay. Here's the rub with that. The rub is you are likely not going to get a proper representative cross-section of folks that are going to address, they're going to address it, right? Think about like Yelp reviews, right? Think about, or like negative, like comments, right? People, there's a certain type of person that always leans in and does that, right? And so while absolutely surveys are important, they add some color to it. Sort of something I heard once, grandmother said, don't read their lips, watch their feet, right? The problem is, unless you can get like 90% of people that watch that thing to take the even 30-second or 15-second survey, what might happen, what's worse than data not at scale? Skewed data. That is because then that will send it the wrong way. So at the end of that, what you're saying, I would love for everybody to provide that word of mouth. But I mean, guys, sometimes I don't even spend the extra second and a half on a platform to do something. So that's why I think that's the case. All right, this side, let's.
Hello, and I think the discussion, it's a really good segue into my questions. I'm Shruti, and before coming to USC, I was leading digital marketing for 11 years, and recently I was with Procter & Gamble, leading brands. And thank you for the insightful discussions. And because the panel has diverse experience in creative, business, and data, so I have two questions. My first question would be, how do you find the right balance between data and intuition while decision making? And especially if you could share with us your experiences where you have had to make decisions that went against what data was prompting you to do, but you went with your own intuition. And my second question would be that nowadays we have a lot of in-film placement for branding and advertising. So how difficult or easy it is to rely on data in order to convince the marketers or brands?
Great questions. Tracey, do you want to answer the first one and keep the second?
Sure. So historically, what we used to do to greenlight content would be look at historically how either the actor, the genre, those things performed, and those were all modeled out, and then you would know, oh, does this look likely successful or not? And then once the content was made, we do focus groups, which were incredibly biased because they would fill out a survey afterwards, but sometimes these guys were laughing because I said, oh, there must have been a really data-driven decision to drop Batgirl off of Warner's slate entirely. But they were like, no, because it's probably, well, first of all, it was a tax write-down, but the other piece is that some people still go with ultimately with just the instinctual gut-driven, the boss said we need to do this. And sometimes when we were changing content after focus grouping, focus groups where we would be in the middle of different cuts of content, one person's comment would be latched onto, and then they would come back to the producers and say, we need you to do this. And we'd be like, let's do 5 more focus groups and see. So the change now is that, I know that there's much more data at the content level and the development level. As I mentioned before, I think can be a little hazardous, but I think more and more, I think we're moving into really looking heavily at data when we're creating, because we're creating for mainly data companies.
So
Right. I have the same questions, and I think like this concept that if the people making decisions could only know what the analysts know, like why would they keep making this thing or placing the ads in this place when we know that that's not, that's not optimal? I've thought about this a lot. It's quite challenging. I think there's a real art that needs to sort of accompany the data science to help make it approachable and safe. And, I've seen in many different environments, like very sophisticated environments, non-sophisticated environments, like regardless of the background. I think in management, people they've been very successful and they've made, part of that success is based on they have good judgment, and to come and show them something in a different way of making decisions, it can be quite challenging. So I think you've got to really bring that sort of artfulness to what you're going to explain. Is it the methodology? Is it the key insight? Is it the decision? And really sort of doing that in a safe sort of a creative way, but not the sort of you must do this or this is what's going to happen. I mean that tends to not be the best route in, although that could work too. I think in film, like there's all these things coming online, like computer vision, putting scripts through machine learning and having those derivatives, sort of suggest what's going to happen based on comparables, right? You put everything through the machine, you get this level set way of looking at things. That sounds weird and scary, and I think this is a hard problem, and it's at the core of bringing data science into the boardroom kind of thing. So I think finance folks are most likely to understand and sort of be accepting. I don't think I'm answering your question, but I think it's a really good question.
You've been waiting for some time. Thank you for the question. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Okay, yeah, these will be last. Yeah. We started a little late, so yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you so much, guys, for the talk. As of now, my name is Ali Hassan. I come from a asset management consulting and private equity background in New York, so not like these other folks here. I'm currently going to do my business analytics master's here at USC. My question is, let's say you have a product that isn't doing too well or a show that's not getting the attention that you want. How do you make that decision between pushing more advertising or just cutting its budget or pushing away from it? So what's that fine line between going forward with something or drawing back from it?
Well, look, as an ad person, there's all these fundamental ways of knowing whether you've put enough out or not enough. So sometimes there are like saturation points, or there are curves, and so part of the question is, have we spent enough? But if the signal on what you've spent is not suggesting it's a success, I mean, that's something to take into account too. But I mean, oftentimes you have to spend to a certain threshold to reach a certain number of people a certain number of times to create the response that you're looking for. But frankly, the product's got to be a good fit, right? So like goodness of fit with the audience is important. So if the product is a stinker, you can't advertise your way to success, which is fundamentally true as well.
Let me ask you a question. You're in private equity asset management. At what point does your firm write down an investment or an asset? Like where you write down the book value? At what point do you like go, you know what? They didn't have the year that they had or the quarter, but if we put more money in, they'll raise the nose of the plane, versus just saying, hey, we're going to write this off. What is the decision-making criteria that your firm uses?
Well, it's really dependent on the industry that you're looking at. I can't really answer right off the bat, but definitely. It
depends. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
I would say, honestly, for me, I've only done acquisitions. So when I do acquisitions, it's pretty much you do a whole refinancing structure, and if it's accepted, it's accepted. If it's not accepted, you just walk away. That's how our firm did it.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
yeah, we'll wrap up.
yeah.
Okay.
So maybe the questions can be asked one-on-one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Can we just do one more? Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. You've been waiting. Yeah.
This is on. Oh, okay, now it's on. My name is Asim. I'm a Web3 content creator, and my question is just basically, I see a lot more when it comes to like media campaigns. I see a lot more like big companies utilizing the actual consumers to create content for them. So as an independent content creator, like who doesn't have like all the access to like machine learning and like all of these things, what are like the best ways to like create enough tension and I guess like buzz to like for like a big brand to be like, we like your strategy, we want to like collaborate with you, if that makes sense.
I feel like that's a producery question, Tracey.
I guess it is. Well, the interesting thing that is in Web3, you can have such a smaller audience that can sustain you because they're participating in your content in such a huge way. And so you could have only 10,000 people who know who you are, and they can actually probably sustain you to a certain degree. So I think you're looking at a much smaller number now. That's going to change because all the big companies are going to rush into what's supposed to be this decentralized space. But I think I wouldn't even be looking for scale if I were you. I would be looking for passion and a unique, very unique narrow vertical in Web3.
Guys, as you heard, we've run out of time, but thank you, panelists. Thank you guys. By the way, you guys made this session because your questions, these were great questions. We'll be mulling around for a few minutes if you guys want to ask any of the questions that we couldn't answer. But again, thank you guys very much. Really appreciate all the work that you guys have done. Thank you, panelists. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.